All right, welcome everyone. My name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me. So this is CD and Vinyl Guys. This is a new episode we're doing. If you've watched some of our previous episodes, we've done two in the past already now. This one we thought we would do as a more sort of loose, without a theme. The other ones have been themes. They've been sort of countdowns, top tens, and we did one that was on Kiss. But now we thought, we would just talk and see where it kind of leads us. Chris and I have a tendency to get on phone calls or Zooms, and we can just go for hours. So we thought, you know what? Let's hit record and let's see what happens. So first off, Chris, thank you for joining me and being a part of this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I mean, as you said, you and I just love to talk about music. So, hey, why don't we just record it and let people hear us babble about music, right?
Exactly. I mean,
maybe we'll say some interesting things.
Hopefully so.
I'm sure we will.
Chris and I jumped on a call last night that we thought was going to be 15, 20 minutes, and it lasted 3 hours. So that's just two music nerds who really love this stuff. And obviously you guys tuning in out there feel the same way about all this sort of stuff. So we thought, let's just hit record and see what happens here. So first off, for those of you guys that are new to my channel, do hit the subscribe button and leave comment, hit like. All those things help support my channel. But I also want to remind you, please head over to Chris Propfe's channel and check him out as well. I'm going to leave a description or not a description, but sorry, a link to his channel in the description below so that you can find him easily. And going forward, we actually hope to start alternating these CD and Vinyl Guy episodes on both our channels back and forth. So eventually you'll be finding these on Chris's channel and you'll find them on my channel as well. We're just going to see what happens here. So I did think, to get things rolling here, Chris, I know that you were at the record store today. You're like me, you enjoy going to the record store a lot. What's a recent find that you got that you're just really excited about or have enjoyed?
Well, as you had mentioned, I do have my own YouTube channel as well, and I'm part of the vinyl community. Yes, there is a vinyl community. I didn't know about it until about 1.5 years ago, but I am a proud member of the vinyl community. And part of the vinyl community, what we do is we send gifts to each other. So I've been gifted some really cool records, along with going to the record store as well. One such album is this album, which is new to me. This is called Reading Rock Volume 1. And right when I saw this, I'm like, okay, is there a volume 2? Because I need to get it. There unfortunately not a volume 2. One of my viewers told me that. But basically what this is it's live from 1982. And as you can see the track listing here, we've got...
Look at the lineup on that.
Yep, Michael Schenker. But you've also got some bands like Budgie on here, and Marillion and UFO. Bands that I had never heard of before, like Spider and Stampede and Terraplane.
Stampede is great. You got to check them out. They're definitely worth it.
And this is on the Mean label.
Okay.
And as I said, this came out in 1982 at the Reading Festival.
Look at that shot. That's great.
And what I love about this album is, we talk about magic years in music. 1980, 83, those early 80s were those magic years. And you could just feel the excitement at this concert. It was almost like, hey, we've got this new music. We're a new band. We need to be heard. We want you guys to hear this because, this new wave of British heavy metal was sort of coming out of the woodworks. People were used to kind of coming out of the punk scene and it was new again. Everything was new. So you definitely feel that energy on the album. And what I like about it, like I said, you have bands like Twisted Sister. But there's some lesser known bands, which is kind of neat for me to learn about. Right. And I think you've actually heard of some of these bands before, like Terraplane.
Right. So yeah, Terraplane is actually the British band Thunder, or developed into that. They did 2 albums before changing, and they're much more melodic band as Terraplane. But for those people who know Thunder, will enjoy that.
I know you mentioned Grand Prix, I think too.
Yeah, and Grand Prix, their last singer was Robin McAuley before he joined MSG, the Macaulay Schenker Project. And of course, he's most recently back with Michael Schenker and the Michael Schenker Fest, but also part of Black Swan, the super group that's got Reb Beach on guitar in it, from Winger and Dokken and so forth. So some really cool bands that you got on there. And that's what I like about a lot of these releases. One is like you said, see, you knew White Snake and Michael Shankar and stuff like that. But then there's bands on there that you didn't know. And so now you have an opportunity to get turned on to that. And that's why I love those kind of compilations.
Yeah, there's another compilation I have too. I'll pull it out at some point, maybe in a video, but Metal for Mothers.
Oh God, I love that. Those are fantastic ones.
Yeah.
Is Metallica on that one?
No, not the one I have. I have some early Iron Maiden on there.
Okay, yeah, there's 2 volumes of that, but I know that those are definitely ones. Maybe they're just ones that influenced Metallica, but definitely.
But there's a lot of bands on there that I had never heard of too. And being a music nerd, I'm like, okay, I got to seek this stuff out, and I've got to look on, Discogs and eBay and try to pick the stuff up. But
right,
that's the fun of it.
Yeah. So while you were pulling that out, it made me think of this one, and this is a recent find that I just got: the Moscow Music Peace Festival from 1989. This was funny thing is this was okay. So his first big concert to happen in Moscow in Russia at the time, kind of a thing before the Iron Curtain, so to speak, had come down. So it's a big deal that all these Western bands were going over there, kind of a thing. But it was also actually a required thing because all these, it was to promote not doing drugs. But listen to the lineup. You got Ozzy Osbourne on here and Skid Row, Motley Crue, all these bands that have done so many drugs. And in 1989, Motley Crue was still, this happened early 1989 before Dr. Feelgood. So they were still promoting the Girls, Girls, Girls album, kind of a thing. Whether or not they had gotten clean at this point, I don't know. But so it's got Scorpions. They do Big City Nights and Dynamite, and then Ozzy's on here. I don't know, and Paranoid. Skid Row does 18 and Life. Cinderella's on here. They do Shake Me.
Great.
Motley Crue does 2 tracks, Looks at Killing, Girls, 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 and then Bon Jovi closes it out with 5 numbers on here. And I didn't know this existed. It's on an Italian label called Golden Stars. Came out in 1991, never got a US release. But I went into my record store a couple months back, right around Christmas time, and saw this for $20. And I was just like, what? I knew the VHS of this and the video, and MTV had played the live concert and all that sort of stuff. But to have a CD of it, that was really, big find for me. I was super excited for that day.
And that's a great lineup. 1989, you've got Skid Row, you got Motley Crue, Ozzy. These bands were at the top of their game at that point.
Right. Well, you mentioned it, like 1982 being a big year, in 83, of course, in metal, there's these seminal years. 1989 was another one of those years. I've always kind of thought of it as the last big year of the metal and hair metal and all that sort of stuff. 1990 was still a big year, but obviously by 1991, so things started to shift already by that point, and people were looking for something else, and the sales started to wane with all of these bands. But by 1989, man, it was all hair bands, all metal. It had not yet shifted. It was the last sort of great year, the last hurrah, if you will.
Yeah, I was 15 years old in 1989, so I was right. That was my time. That was my music, and I identified with it. I wanted to have the long hair, and I wanted to dress like Motley Crue.
I'm gonna have to see a picture of that. I didn't have long hair in '89. Wasn't allowed to grow my long hair until I went to college in 1984, when my mom essentially no longer, had rules over me, kind of a thing, because I was 18 and older. But yeah, I had the long hair too, and you had long hair, so that's pretty great. And of course, now look at us. We're both.
Yeah, and I didn't have long hair. I never was able to. Yeah.
No, you never were able to pull it off.
I wanted long hair.
I had the long hair, but now I'm definitely follically challenged. So
yeah, me too. Yeah, but it's easier though, easier to take care of.
Yes, I love this. Now, because I had asked you what was or most recent sort of really good record store find that you had. This is mine, and I actually just got this in the mail today. I'm a big Yes fan, prog rock fan, and I very much like Trevor Rabin, and especially what he's done movie score wise and all that sort of stuff. And I had always had this album here from the late 80s. I think it was 89. Can't Look Back. But this was heavily, heavily overproduced. So I actually just found a copy of this, the Face to Face album.
Oh,
And
nice.
this one, yeah, this one here, I was buying it really just as a Trevor Rabin fan, but I've never really listened to it. And I popped it on today, and it just was like the perfect thing. It just was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. I kind of, needed a new direction, something to go in with music. And this one here, this is really, really good stuff that just hit the spot for me today, at least. So I was very excited about getting that. Yeah.
I love discovering new albums and maybe even artists that we know, but a release by them that we're not familiar with. And
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what this is. As I said, I'm certainly and most people know who Trevor Rabin is, kind of a thing. But I think these earlier releases, like this one, he's got another solo album called Wolf, and I think a self-titled one at the beginning, that he started with. Kind of thing. He came from a band before that, Rabbit. He's a South African artist, nationality kind of thing. So he was doing those things first, but of course didn't, get popular until joining Yes for their 90215 or 901, 25 album. I just pulled this one out just to reference it because he has released the demos, calling them 90124.
Oh,
So
that's
these are
cool.
the demos that he brought to Yes that became their 90125 album with Owner of a Lonely Heart and so forth.
Yeah.
So if you ever, you want to know what those things sounded like before Yes got a hold of them, Trevor Rabin has put those out. Really good stuff there.
So I'm interested. I mean, obviously, what those songs became were hits, and they were so produced and played.
Yeah.
Like just to the T. I mean, how were those demos? I mean, obviously they were rougher, I'm sure, but were they heavier? Were they not as proggy? Were they not as poppy?
It basically is the exact same album. I have to say that when I got this, I was surprised how little they changed. Now, certainly there's the virtuosity and whatnot that each member brought to it, playing the demo, the quality of the members of Yes that they brought to it made a far superior release. But the songs really didn't change. They are, the songs that are on here, Hold On and Change and Owner of a Lonely Heart and so forth, they're exactly what they are. Now, the cool thing is there's a number of tracks on here that didn't become Yes songs. So by picking this up, you're getting more material from that period that you brought to the band that they didn't actually produce into it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 tracks on this. About half of it became the Yes album.
Yeah, I was just interested because a lot of times in situations like that where people hear the demos, sometimes they say they actually like the demos more than what the album became. So I was just interested to hear what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, my particular opinion, I grew up on the Yes album itself, so I think I will always hold that as the ultimate thing.
Right.
But being one a Yes fan and then further a Trevor Rabin fan, being able to get the demos and having more insight into what that is, I certainly enjoy it. But if I have my choice, I will go back to the Yes album time for that.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out because I like that era of Yes.
Mm-hmm. Are you a Yes or a prog fan at all?
I am a prog fan. Yeah, you know what? I don't listen to a lot of prog, but it's funny because I have a lot of prog, but I don't listen to a lot of prog. Like one of my favorite, and this album is crazy. One of my favorite Yes albums is Tales from Topographic Oceans.
Oh, well, that's like full on prog, man. Because
I know, well, that's what I'm saying.
A lot of people don't think of Asia as prog, right? Because this is the more pop side. It's sort of like what Yes did with 90125. But, there's plenty of prog stuff that is shorter songs and more poppy and more accessible. But Tales from Topographic Ocean, man, that's not one of my favorite Yes albums. Not that I dislike it. I like Close to the Edge. That's
but you're right. I mean, Tales is basically prog 101.
Absolutely. Yeah. So okay, if you're listening to that, then you're a prog fan.
Yeah, and I get okay. So I like Gentle Giant. Okay, so I do like prog.
Oh yeah, you're right. Jethro Tull, you into any of them,
Jethro Tull. But
right?
I mean, prog is sort of a loose term because, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon could be considered a prog album as well.
Well, it is. Yeah, I mean, I would
Yeah, I
consider
mean, but it's sort of it's like prog light. It's like the Coors Light of
yeah.
prog.
I mean, Alan Parsons' project is still prog, but you're right.
Right.
It's a well produced, radio friendly version. That's why I held up the Asia album. I was like, this is still prog, but it's the most simplified, short 3-minute song version of it. Um, GTR. You guys familiar with these guys? And
And I have that on vinyl actually.
yeah, Steve Hackett with Steve Howe and Max Bacon singing. Max Bacon, great vocalist who just didn't do a whole lot. I wish he had.
Yeah.
Got this on
No,
vinyl.
a prog band that people forget about is the Moody Blues.
Oh yeah, right,
I
absolutely.
mean, they were a prog band as well. I mean, you think about
They started in the '60s.
yeah, Knights in White Satin when they started to incorporate classical music. This is one of their later albums on the Long Distance Voyager, which is
Okay.
my favorites. And they, by this point they started to lose the prog sound. It was a little bit more poppy, but
Mhm.
the Moody Blues, if you question whether they're a prog band, you should listen to their album, A Question of Balance,
Okay.
On the Threshold of a Dream. Those two albums, it's just a different form of prog. I think that's, prog wears a lot of different hats.
Absolutely. I think it's like most genres. I mean, if we talk about rock, we talk about hard rock, we talk about metal, or we talk about thrash, it's like there's so many, it's such a wide category of bands that can fit within those things. And you're right, prog is exactly the same thing. And I think most people think, yes, most people think Tales of Topographic Ocean. They think of a song that is the full one album side
Right.
kind of a thing, 20 minutes long, over embellished, that's what prog is. And that's one style of prog, but that I think prog is also just very technical musicianship. It
Well, we
really,
didn't even talk about Fate's Warning,
yeah,
Dream Theater,
right.
you know,
Right. I consider prog metal.
yeah, Queensryche.
Hmm. But
Yeah.
Dream Theater, absolutely. I mean, they made prog metal popular in
Yeah.
the '90s, right? They came out, it's actually their second album. What was their second album titled? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't remember.
I'm drawing
I'm not the biggest Dream Theater fan. I mean, I like Dream Theater.
Images and Words, right? And
Okay.
Pull Me Under. But with this here, these guys really kicked off prog metal, and then it just exploded with so many other bands in the '90s. Spock's Beard and
Yeah.
can't think of them. And I don't know that these are all coming from the '90s, but Flower Kings and just lots and lots of different bands popped up around this period to do that. And it's like Dream Theater is now looked as like sort of the godfathers of prog metal.
Yeah.
They were coming at it as a metal band who loved Rush. Rush is a prog band. And I never considered Rush prog growing up with them. It wasn't until later years reading about it where it's like, oh, Rush is really considered prog. I mean, I just thought they were a classic rock band kind of
Well,
a
yeah, but listen to 2112, and it's like it's total prog.
absolutely. But then it's like compare it to like, Spirit of Radio and Subdivisions and stuff. And it's like, or Tom Sawyer. It's like all of those things. But those songs, even though they're shorter, radio friendly songs, they're extremely complex. They are still what make prog prog. It's just that these guys were amazing at crafting songs that could both be radio friendly and yet complex at the same time.
That was a cool time in music where those prog bands, like you said, started to become a little bit more radio friendly. Had the Genesis band.
Yeah, that's another one.
Mold into something. You had John Wetton leave King Crimson. He formed the band UK.
Right.
And they did their
light
version of prog.
Right, exactly. That was an early version of that before he then joins Asia. and he takes
Right.
it a step further. So I mean,
Right.
you got Steve Howe from Yes in Asia, and Jeff Downs on keyboards, who also had come from Asia. But really, I mean, he was coming from the Buggles,
Right.
which is a pop band, but had prog influences
Right.
to them. And yeah, John Wetton, and then Carl Palmer from ELP, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And it's like you put these guys together, but they were turning out 3 to 4 minute pop songs that again were still very complex. But yeah, it kicked off an entirely new sort of, I want to say genre, but I mean a movement. I guess it's a movement that was within pop music, because new wave was the thing that was starting off in the early 80s. And these prog bands that were considered dinosaurs by the late 70s, early 80s, were able to come in and make that sort of new wave pop music and completely reinvent themselves.
Yeah, I mean, look at Peter Gabriel. His early albums were very, when he left Genesis, they were still very proggy, till he sort of wound his way into the album So, where, then it's full on pop.
Right. Yeah. He had
not pop in a bad way, but just commercial.
Absolutely. I mean, before that, he had, Games Without Frontiers and some, hints of brilliance along the way that were pointing to what it was that he would achieve. And by the time he did So, I mean, that's an album still to this day that can't be topped, like Invisible Touch by Genesis. I mean, these two bands that were super, super deep into the prog world by the 80s were able to craft these albums. And what's amazing too is that I don't know, marketing or the media or whatever didn't discard them for having been from an older generation of music, and we're like, here's the new Genesis and it sounds like this, and everyone rallied around it. I mean, that's very hard to do today. If you're from a different generation of music, you can put out the greatest album in the world, but people won't give you the time of day because you're not young and hip and cool and so forth.
And those were huge changes. I mean, if you compare Motorhead's last album with Lemmy to their first album, there's really not much of a change. I mean, Motorhead was Motorhead, but you compare Invisible Touch to Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, it's like
night and day. Yeah,
and you're right. It's amazing how they were able to keep the Genesis name, totally change their style.
Right.
And frontman.
Too, like for Genesis, it worked out because Peter Gabriel left. He was the vocalist and the front man. He's what people associated. And because it was the 70s and the band didn't have an image the way that we think of image today. With the internet and video and pictures on camera phones and all that sort of stuff, you can't really get away with replacing a frontman today the way you could in the 70s. And so Genesis replacing Peter Gabriel with Phil Collins, and Phil Collins being a drummer in the band. I mean, it wasn't like they went out and even got another frontman, to come in and take over and do the theatrics and everything that Peter Gabriel was doing. But somehow it worked, so that by the time they got into the 80s, they sounded like a different band.
I always thought Phil Collins' voice was very similar to Peter Gabriel's. They had a sort of the same timbre, sort of same, I don't know, the vocal stylings, the phrasing. I thought that they were, I mean, you can tell the difference between them, but I thought that they were very similar in vocal style.
No, you're right about that. But what I more mean is that the Genesis of the late 70s and early 80s was really a different band. So that somebody hearing it on the radio wasn't saying, oh, that's Genesis because I hear Peter Gabriel or whatever kind of a thing. This was a band that had shortened its songs. The singer was different, so that if a song came on, you didn't immediately say that's Genesis kind of a thing. And so I think that because without the internet and stuff like that, and so people weren't immediately able to say, wait, that guy that I'm seeing doesn't look like the other guy that was there, to the point that they say, I don't want to follow Genesis because it doesn't have the original vocalist. And they were just hearing Genesis and going, hey, I like this. This is good stuff. And that stuff I think was able to happen more. If you look at bands from the 70s, they could replace singers and band members so much easier than they could by the time the 80s rolled around and MTV took over with videos. And then all of a sudden bands had images. And try to replace a vocalist, a front man, somebody who epitomized the band in the 80s, extremely difficult. I mean, one of the only bands that was ever able to do it was Van Halen.
Van Halen, yeah.
Yeah. You know, usually if a band member died, in the case of AC/DC with Bon Scott, people accepted Brian Johnson because there was no going back to Bon Scott. So they couldn't go to a concert and say, oh, you know, I miss Bon Scott, please bring him back. This was sort of like, okay, Bon Scott's gone and we're sad that he's gone, but this is the new guy. We have to accept that. And once though you had MTV and people, you know, imagery was so much a factor of music, because imagery really wasn't a factor of music before MTV. It was just something that I always find really interesting, that 70s bands, the number of member changes. Like, I don't think Yes would be a successful band today if they were starting new and doing the constant member changes that they do. But that was something that was okay, and it happened, and the music quality stayed at a level.
But they kept the one constant, which was John Anderson.
Right. I think that's the biggest thing, because when it did take the sort of downturn for them was the drama era when they had Trevor Horn.
And I want to just go back to what you were saying about Genesis, because I think Genesis was smart. They did a gradual change. Look at the albums following Peter Gabriel's departure.
Yeah, Trick of the Tail.
Yeah, it was a gradual change to Invisible Touch.
Right. They didn't make, it was
a little bit more on each album.
You're right.
So it wasn't like, boom, here's Saint Anger, where people, wait, what the heck is going on? It's like, it was a gradual change. And by the time Invisible Touch came along, people were like, okay, yeah, I kind of had a feeling they were headed this way because of other albums. Yeah.
Well, you make a good point there with Saint Anger, and even with Load and Reload. I mean, Metallica, well, the Black Album, but it's like Metallica has made some very drastic changes. Now, if Metallica had not been the size of Metallica, I don't think they could have easily done this.
No.
And the 90s, where metal was being shunned. So for Metallica to make the Black Album was welcome, because it was the more radio friendly thing. But if they made the Black Album too, I don't think it would have been as successful as Load. But Load made it radio friendly, and it was less metal, and it made it so that I think that radio would continue to play it and so forth. New fans could get into it. It was 5 years on from the Black Album.
See, here's my problem with Load and Reload. I feel like with the Black Album, Metallica was still forging a new path, and I think bands were following them with that. By Load and Reload, Metallica was now following other bands. I mean, you listen to Load and Reload, they were basically copying what Soundgarden was doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that, and the drastic change in looks for them, like you would, like, it sounds so stupid to say, I'm not going to listen to this band because the guy cut his hair, but Metallica went from like long hair and like James going, yeah, and then they were like wearing makeup, short hair, and like stylish clothes. I mean, so it was a total look change, and it was a total sound iconic change. And I think it was just too much for people to handle.
I agree. And if it hadn't been 5 years on and the name itself Metallica, where I think, again, like the Black Album, I think younger fans were coming into it. The Black Album was really the first album for me by Metallica. I mean, I knew of the song One, I knew of Injustice for All. I did not own any Metallica. So the first thing I was buying was the Black Album. But there's people who listen to them from the Kill 'Em All up to Injustice for All that hate the Black Album. There's people that have the Black Album but can't stand Load and Reload and so forth. But there's such a big name, and there was a period of time between it that I think, you know, no matter what they put out, it was going to be successful to a degree. But they were able to change enough within it that younger fans coming in kept them alive. I don't think it's a diehard Metallica fan base that kept them alive through the 90s. I think it's all the younger fans that were coming in that were saying, who's this huge band Metallica? I got to check them out. And then they were able to get behind them because they made the more pop metal, then they made the more grunge metal and so forth. And the misstep was when they did Saint Anger. You know, they tried to change again, to do something again. And by that point, it needed to revert back to where they had started, which they finally did for Death Magnetic.
Right.
Saint Anger, while having some brilliance to it on certain parts, was just that was too much for me. And I had listened to them all and enjoyed the Black Album, Load, Reload, Garage Incorporated, the orchestra, you know, S&M, you know, all of that sort of stuff that they had been doing. But that album, I was just like, what is this?
I think the toughest part of that album is it's the snare sound by Lars. It sounds like he's sitting in a tin can.
Yeah.
It would have been fine for like maybe one or two songs.
Right.
But it's the whole freaking album. And you know, the songs, they needed to be edited a little bit. The other thing too is like
lack of solos are on, you know, no lack of solos.
And I understand the vibe they were going for.
Right.
They wanted to pretend that they were a garage band and like, we're just going to hit record and we're just going to come up with a song. But it's like, guys, you're Metallica. Like, we don't want to hear James's voice like cracking. We don't want to hear like, you know, something that sounds like it was recorded in a garage. Like, we want to hear Master of Puppets. You know what I mean?
All of Metallica's albums are so well produced. Those guys work everything out to the nth degree in what they're recording, and they may not look like
people might argue with you on that for Injustice for All because of the lack of bass.
That to me is just a mixing. You're absolutely right about that. And that's just a mixing thing, but it was recorded with bass on it, kind of a thing. But yeah, you know, it's funny because there's something like that on every one of their albums, you know, Injustice for All, the lack of bass, but that was never an issue for me until late into the 90s when I started hearing people talk about it and complaining. And going back and listening to it and going, okay, yeah, there's lack of bass. There's lack of bass by comparison to what we know today and what we know on Metallica releases today. But at the time, I mean, those early Metallica records are much more in the high range than in the low bass range of stuff. And that was just part of the new wave of British heavy metal style of recording. You know.
Well, you listen to those early Metallica songs from Kill 'Em All. They were basically just copying Diamond Head.
Oh, yeah. They owe everything.
I think they would, James and Lars would admit that because if anybody out there, if you haven't listened to Diamond Head, I'm telling you right now, listen to Diamond Head and then listen to Kill 'Em All, and you're going to see that Metallica basically ripped off Diamond Head.
Well, they'll tell you in a heartbeat. I mean, Lars was a huge new wave of British heavy metal fan. He had all those singles, which were not popular here in the States. They were required to do cover songs in the clubs. So they reluctantly did it, but they did it with songs that people wouldn't recognize. And they even said people thought they were originals and they just neglected to tell people that they were cover songs because, hey, if you think it's an original or, you know, whatever, like it's giving us more, you know, publicity or whatever. But you know, fortunately, they have given Diamond Head its due. They have had Diamond Head guest and open for them. They have put their songs on numerous compilations or, you know, like Garage Incorporated and stuff. And Brian Tatler, the guitarist from Diamond Head, will say that Metallica saved his career. He holds no ill will to the fact that Metallica got famous for doing Diamond Head songs because the royalties he's made on it has made him have a living at music, kind of a thing. And
well, I wouldn't have known who Diamond Head was. I wouldn't have known who Budgie was if it was Metallica. I might not have even known who the Misfits were if it wasn't for Metallica, because I remember hearing them cover Last Caress and Green Hell on Garage Incorporated, or whatever the hell that album was called. And I'm like, what are these songs? These songs are awesome.
Right. Out of the 5 songs,
Yeah, the Misfits and Samhain. So
that was the one that stood out to me too. And I was like, who is this? And I look at that and I see that it's written by Glenn Danzig. And I'm like,
yeah,
Danzig, wait, is that the same Danzig that's doing the blues rock? That doesn't sound anything like this. And so for a long time, I knew that, okay, Glenn Danzig came from the Misfits, but Misfits don't sound like Danzig. I like Danzig, kind of a thing, until they actually put out the box set, the Misfits box set in the mid 90s. And I went to my local record store and it had like a sampler disc that I could put on a CD player in the store and listen to.
yeah.
And it was just like, this stuff sounds exactly like what Metallica did, the 598 Garage Days EP kind of thing. And I ended up buying the whole box set of the Misfits because I realized it was all of that. And that was kind of the thing that made me go back and say, if I love Metallica, who does Metallica like?
Yeah.
And I started searching out all those new wave of British heavy metal bands.
Yeah, and I have a similar story because I bought the Misfits box set as well. I have the Samhain box set.
Yeah, another great band.
I just bought yesterday Samhain Final Descent.
Right.
Now, this was the last album before they formed into Danzig. Now, this happens to be a bootleg on.
Well, for those of you who don't know, Samhain is got Glenn Danzig in it. I mean, it's Misfits. He then formed Samhain before forming Danzig the band, and that was really due to Rick Rubin and Def Jam Records, which he was signed to at the time, that basically was saying, we like what you're doing, but let's produce it to a good level, because all of this stuff was do-it-yourself. It was self-recording sort of stuff, demo quality, really.
And what's interesting on this album, Final Descent, and I don't think that this ever had a proper vinyl release, but you got Eerie Von on bass, but you've also got John Christ on some of the guitars, and John Christ would go on to be in
Danzig. Right.
Also, I don't know if anybody knows the drummer, but the drummer of Danzig in the beginning was Chuck Biscuits.
Yes.
And he came from a Canadian punk band called DOA.
Right. He also been on the Social Distortion.
Right. And Chuck Biscuits, I think he played with Black Flag as well.
Yeah, he was around. He was a punk drummer first before doing some of this other stuff. But the thing that I always found most, I don't know, not interesting, comical almost, was how high he sat on his drum stool.
Yeah.
He sat so high and drumming down on it. It was just, I'd never seen anybody do that kind of a thing. It stood out to me.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we have to thank Metallica. I love Metallica. Yeah. I'm a big Metallica. My first Metallica album was Ride the Lightning, because I remember, I think I told you my first hard rock album was Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet.
Right.
So I'll admit it. It was Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet. I don't care.
That's
yeah, but my jump into metal, I went hardcore. I went Metallica, Ride the Lightning, Black Sabbath, Sabotage. Those were my first two metal albums. Fight Fire with Fire came on for the first time.
Yeah.
It scared the heck out of me. I had never heard anything as heavy or as fast. And that has that light little classical intro to it. You're like, oh, okay, this is going to be a great listen. And then bam, it hits you over the head.
Yeah. My favorite thing is that snare grab that Lars does on that.
And then you got Ride the Lightning, and you've got For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Fade to Black, and Creeping Death, and The Call of Cthulhu. And I mean, the album is just relentless. It just smacks you over the head.
Absolutely.
And then from there, I couldn't get enough. Then it was like Slayer and Exodus and Testament and Death Angel and all those bands. So
tons of great stuff, and definitely a segue into another topic here. So I think we'll wrap this one up here. We've been doing this talking just off the cuff for 30 minutes here. And as
we could probably talk for like 6 hours.
Oh, we absolutely could, but I want to make this something that people can actually devour here. So, but I do find this interesting, and this is the way I think a lot of music fans talk, but definitely the way you and I will talk, which is all the tangents and things like that. Yeah. I mean, we start with the Reading Festival thing, the Moscow Music Peace Festival, so new wave of British heavy metal, which we certainly circle back to with Metallica.
Talked about Prague.
We talked about Prague, hair bands. We covered so many different things within that. And I think that is the beauty of music and the fun of being the fan of music and where it can go. And you can be listening to one thing and you can end up somewhere completely different. I mean, look at my shirt, Hurricane, you know, a hairband. You've got Ghost on. You've got some Johnny Cash in the background. I've got some Tora Tora and some Pink Floyd.
Dude, I was just listening to the Indigo Girls today. This album's killer.
Yeah, exactly.
Closer to Fine. Yeah, I love it.
Right. So it just shows.
Game the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We could do like the 6 degrees of Lemmy Kilmister.
That's so true. Yeah, I know. There's a couple artists that are like that have just been seemingly everywhere, and yeah, certainly one of those guys. So. All right, so as a reminder, guys, we are the CD and Vinyl guys, and we're going to do more discussions and things like this going forward in the future. Check the description below so that you can click on the link to go check out Chris Propfe's channel. And, you know, remember to leave comments and hit like and all those sort of things. And I will open this up and say, hey, guys, if you have topics or ideas that you'd love for Chris and I to discuss, to get into, we'd be happy to hear about those and certainly take them into account going forward. All right, so we'll wrap things up here and we'll say happy fond farewell to everyone. Take care.
Bye, guys.
All right, bye-bye.